players will end up being a product of your environment. I've got to be honest, when I went to Chelsea, it changed a little bit, and I tried to get the players to reflect less a lot of the time. I really tried to channel their reflection to just on the things that really was important, that mattered. We celebrated things like, 1v1 duels and picking up second balls. We celebrated it within the analysis process and made them realise, the players, how important these were. We all want hard work, we all want relentless hard work, all those things. But I think making the sessions enjoyable is hugely important. When we talk about football, we talk about the tactical, the technical, the physical, the social, but they're not divided. They've all got to be there all the time. If you've got an idea and it's not being met with mass approval, there's a good chance it might be a really good idea.
Hello coaches, welcome back to another Modern Soccer Coach interview. This week we are joined by Mark Robinson, Chelsea under-21s, Wimbledon first team, also heavily involved in the academy there as well. Player development is a topic that we've talked about so much, it's talked about a lot in the football world. We don't really talk about player development from the specifics of 18 through 25, how to get that player from the youth team into the first team, how difficult it is to break through at a club like Chelsea, at a professional contract, at a Champions League club. What does that look like? And where I think Mark is absolutely unbelievable is how much creativity as a coach do you have to be, not just to be flexible in your style of coaching, but also things around the environment that can spark something here and there to help the player. Brilliant stuff. I hope you enjoy. If you do, please like, please subscribe. Thanks for all the support for Modern Soccer Coach. Here's Mark, enjoy. Mark, thanks so much for joining me today on the Modern Soccer Coach podcast. Really excited to chat.
Pleasure, Gary.
So I want to talk about the word potential at the start and talk about, we use it a lot obviously in youth development. When you're at the cutting edge and you're at a club and players are looking to break through at the very peak of football world, what needs to be in place alongside the talent for it to work?
Well, I think the biggest thing, Gary, when you're looking at potential and talent to make it as a pro football, the biggest thing, I always talk to the players, is trust fundamentally. In football, you've got to earn the first team manager's trust, and that sort of comes across in many ways, and a lot of it is around relentless behaviour. And I think for a manager to play a young player, a young prospect, he needs to know he trusts him, because I think the average tenure of a manager now is down to 10 months. So with all the will in the world, as much as they want to play products and academy products, they need to trust them. So a lot of the work that I've done and what you do is around relentless behaviours, really, and getting players to understand how important it is to have these relentless behaviours on the football pitch. I think any manager will forgive a mistake. Every player is going to make a mistake, but what they want to see is relentless behaviour on and off the pitch, and someone they can trust, and that's what every program that I've built, training program, is built around that.
So when you've got a manager like, say for example, Pochettino, who has a reputation for believing in youth players and has done really well of integrating them. So when he comes to you and he's like, listen, player X, player Y, what type of that relentless attitude or that relentless mindset, you said they're on and off the pitch, what type of questions or what does that conversation, can you give us a little bit of an insight as to what that sounds like?
Yeah, firstly, they'd be looking, normally the process would be they would go across to training anyway, so they would see things that they like in training, and then they would ask you, what do you think he can add? Will he add something? So they're looking in terms of, what is the player's super strength? Is he going to add something that they haven't already got, within the squad? So you're looking at their super strength. And then it would be built around trust. It would be, we're really pleased with what we've seen in training. Is this what we can expect from him all the time? And you back that up and you say, yeah, definitely, because obviously you've got to know the player on a deeper level. And that's what's so key. I've always looked at it when I send a player over to first team training. If you then get a player come back, and you always ask how they're getting on, if if there's a little bit of lack of quality, you can kind of almost handle that a little bit because you know the standard's going to be so high. But the one thing you don't want to hear is poor body language, lack of intensity. They're the things you don't want to hear, because you can always go back and try and work on areas of quality and stuff like that. So that would be the biggest thing is they'd want to know, are they going to add something extra to the team that we need in that position? And can they, and do they think that they can trust them? They're the key. They would be the key conversations.
Brilliant. It's so interesting. You've done a lot of work in player reflection, and obviously believing in the player in taking on an awareness, a level of awareness as those types of behaviours they're going to require to get to the next level. How important is it that surely, because I battle this all the time when I think about it, surely if the player is aware of everything and how big this opportunity is and how big the pressure is, and like you only get this cameo for, if you could put your career back 5 years, how important is it that the player is aware of all that piece, or do you look at shielding them from some pressure? How do you facilitate that in the environment?
No, it's a great question, and I'd say I've changed my opinion on it over time, and also with the clubs I've worked at. So when I was at Wimbledon working with young players, I was big on reflection, and with no disrespect to those players, the level obviously wasn't so high, and we had quite big reflection processes in place because we felt it was really important for them to kind of have a chance of making it at the level that they reflected honestly. I've got to be honest, when I went to Chelsea, it changed a little bit, and I tried to get the players to reflect less a lot of the time, because when you go at that level, there's so much scrutiny on them as young players. There's so much going on anyway, with social media, all that kind of thing. All you want to look for really is reflection, that relative reflection, if that makes sense, because they tend to over reflect anyway because they're looking at too much, they're worrying about too much. So I really tried to channel their reflection to just on the things that really, really was important, that mattered. So it was almost less reflection, but what was more important. And what we did in terms of our reflection process was everything was positive reinforcement. So all our analysis, reflection, it was all done through positive reinforcement. So we just kept showing them best practice. So, if it was a defender, 1v1 defending, in games, we'd just pick out best practice, showing him when he was doing it his very best. Because what I found, these young lads were under so much pressure and so much expectation, showing them best practice and getting them to just reflect on the necessary was really, really important. So if anything, it was less reflection, if that makes sense. Yeah.
I would almost, again, trying to picture the process, I would always imagine that when you're you're probably looking at 90% to 91%. Like it's probably as minute to break through at that level. So you would, as a coach, the temptation is almost to go into to correction because the margins are so small. So it probably is quite challenging to go into strengths-based at that, is it?
Yeah, I mean, again, because the level of player was high, I just found that the social psychological side a bigger club was different, So I had to adapt as a coach, and as I said, I formed an analysis process where everything was based around best practice, because what you tended to find was they were all capable of doing what they needed to do at a certain time. There was no players where you go, oh, he can't do that, or they were capable of doing it. What they weren't always capable of was doing it consistently and relentlessly. So we formed a process where just, as I said, all the analysis was built around best practice. It was really enjoyable. We celebrated things like, 1v1 duels and picking up second balls. We celebrated it within the analysis process and made them realise, the players, how important these were, because again, you're in a world there where, players want to outshine the next best player through creativity, and you don't want to lose that. But fundamentally, it goes back to the trust aspect as well. And, you know, all these other little elements, picking up second balls, 1v1 duels, defending well at set pieces, all those things. So we had a massive celebration of those actions during our analysis program, which I felt worked really, really well, rather than, you know, saying, picking out, oh, you didn't do that well enough, you didn't do that enough. We just showed them when they were doing it really, really well. And then it was about, then we'd take that into training, and can you perform that all the time? You know, so even in training, you know, I stopped a lot of things, but I made sure in training that whether it was 5v5, 7v7, there was always throw-ins, there was always opportunities to take corners, things like that. So even if we were doing a 7v7, we always, you know, a lot of sessions you see, they start with the goalkeeper. If it went out for a corner, we took a corner. And within that, we would want players blocking, we want players defending. Do you know what I mean? So there was always that game element all the time. And we sort of got to a thing where, you know, at that level, whereas if it wasn't looking like the game, then why are we doing it? You know, it needed to be looking like the game for these players.
Hello, coaches. We'll take a quick break here. As always, thank you so much for listening to the podcast, for supporting the podcast. We always encourage, if you do enjoy the episodes, please give them a like, please leave a review. And if you want to go one step further, please share it with your coaching community. Really, really appreciate all the help. We've got a lot of new stuff on Modern Soccer Coach that's coming out in the next couple of weeks. We've got an upcoming webinar, 4-2-3-1. We go through the 4-2-3-1 system. We've just finished one on back threes. We've also had an AI one that was free a couple of months ago as well. If you want to check that out, all on the Modern Soccer Coach website. There's tons of information over there that's free. And if you want to go one step further and support the work, just go into modernsoccercoach.com/shop. And there's some options there as well. Thank you so much for everything you do. 50,000 subscribers. We're going to get to 100,000 very, very soon. All right, thanks so much. See you soon. Bye.
Chelsea has amazed me for years and years, because it's almost a unique culture where they've made a lot of changes, a lot of managerial changes, but there's been a consistent, whether it's just winning or there's a consistent standard at Chelsea that over the last 20 odd years. When you're designing those sessions, you mentioned there about the enjoyment level, is that another balancing act, trying to challenge that bracket of player and trying then to free them up in the session? How do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, because we all want hard work, we all want relentless hard work, all those things. But I think making the sessions enjoyable is hugely important, because as I said, there's a lot of pressure on these lads anyway, and I think it's really, you know, and there's plenty of room for him to be enjoying in training. So, you know, when I went in there, it was quite a unique time for Chelsea, because the under-21s had actually nearly got relegated the season before. They stayed up last kick of the last game of the season, which for Chelsea was, you know, very rare. So you know, and I felt that when I went in, you could feel the mood was a little bit anxious. So, you know, within all the hard work and building the culture, you know, and I used some processes I've used at Wimbledon, which, you know, made me a little bit nervous, because it's a different animal, you know, Chelsea to Wimbledon, completely different animal, but and getting the coaches to buy into that. But it was all done around a real positive environment, you know. So I try to give you an example. So we have a thing called winners. We had a thing called Winners Do More at Wimbledon, and it was basically around, traditionally in football, the team that loses would put the gear away or do an extra run, all that. And you know, we flip that. It's like, well, if you win, if the team that lose are doing extra running, well, then they're getting fitter than the team that won. So we flipped it, and it's like, well, the team that win, you're the ones that get to do more. So I explained this to the coaches, what it looked like, how it works, how we're going to do it. So literally one of my first pre-season sessions, and I didn't realise this, I've got 5 or 6 first team players come down, and they're obviously within the team because everything was competitive. So I've explained how we're going to do this Winners Do More at the end of the session. And then I'm thinking, oh no, I've got so-and-so in this team, so-and-so in this team. And at the end of the session, I'm going to be making them go and do box to boxes, you know, but to be fair, I stuck with it. And the team that won did have a couple of first team players in there, and I sent them over with the S&C coach and said, look, here's your reward. Brilliant. Over you go with Elliot. And some of the lads were taking the mickey because they knew they were going off to run. So the other lads were like, oh, and one of the players knew me from Wimbledon because we had a lad there, and he said, I told you, Robbo would do this. And and the other coaches started to get a bit frustrated, going, oh, look, they're taking the mick that they're running. I went, look, you got to let this grow organically. Don't worry about it. This is not something, you can't force it upon people. So I just walked past the lads who were kind, and I just went, yeah, as long as you realise they're getting fitter where you're standing there. And I just left it at that. So it took about a week, 2 weeks, but we went on tour to Portugal, and same thing. We did the competition, did the game. The lads went off, the team went to run, and then one of the players stood up and just went, come on, lads, they're not going to get fitter while we sit here. And they all just went over as a mass, and they all went over. They all started doing it. They all did extra. But, so you had to let it grow. But it was all, as I said, it was all done through a positive environment. And in the end, they just all bought into that. So after training, they all wanted to do extra. And it wasn't always running then. It might look like, working on their crossing, working on this. But it was just that mentality of after, not you're doing more because you want to be successful, if that makes sense.
Yeah, God, I love that. I can't imagine how challenging that would be as a coach doing that in an environment, like you said, with those professionals alongside it. That's a good test for your philosophy there.
It was the biggest challenge at Chelsea. Like, I got warned about it, but I didn't quite realise, 1 minute you prepare for training, and then you've got Lukaku comes and joins you, and Aubameyang comes and joins you, and you've got all these processes, and you're thinking, but to be fair, the players were great. I just explained to them why we did things, why it was important, and asked them, if we could, and they bought into them. They were incredible. They were all fantastic, and they bought into everything we did. It was great.
Brilliant. Yeah, let's go down that road of like innovation and doing things a little bit different. With your work at Wimbledon and the self-managing processes that you put in, which, I mean, some of these are unbelievable. Let's talk about them. But before we do, can you kind of describe where you saw in the development pathway, where you saw the issue, or where you saw something down the road that these players will have to be independent, and how you kind of went through the process of designing it?
Yeah, I mean, when I started at Wimbledon, the guy who kind of ran the youth section, because when I started at Wimbledon, all the lads were playing Sunday League football. It literally was coats for goals, first training session. It was wow. And the first team were Ryman Prem in the Ryman Premier League when I joined, just coming up to the, so it was Sunday. It was literally Sunday League football. But the guy who kind of headed it up, Nigel Higgs, was really keen about developing people as well as players, because he knew the stats and of how many players are going to make it, but he wanted to produce good people, Wimbledon being a fan-owned club. So there was a big emphasis on that anyway. So I knew what the remit was. So as we built the programme, we had sort of different hook lines that we worked under. So the academy was homegrown and hungry. That was our principal sort of line. But then we had the winners do more, which was more around the football and sort of doing extra, taking responsibility for your football learning. But then we also had Better People Make Better Dons, which was our kind of social psych thing. So that was our social program. And we used to do loads of little things around that. It's hard to remember them all, Gary, but pre-season, the youth team would go and help the fans get the stadium ready for the season. So whether it be painting turnstiles, painting the crash barriers, cleaning up. So it was a consistent program, basically, and we used to give the players an awful lot of ownership on certain things as well. We also wanted to be the two-footed academy, because again, when I went in at Wimbledon, you looked at, I wouldn't say we were bottom of the barrel in terms of the players we got, but you look at the competition you've got around you. Obviously, got Chelsea, Arsenal, Tottenham, Queen's Park Rangers, Crystal Palace. So in terms of the players you were getting, you just weren't getting the best players. That just wasn't happening. So you had to look and you go, well, if you're running the same program as everyone else, why are you going to get different results? You need to be doing something different. So you're not doing it different just for the sake of being different, but you had to be innovative and you had to be creative and you had to go, well, if we're actually going to produce professional footballers, we need to be doing something different. So we wanted to have a strong technical program, and we thought, well, if we could develop two-footed players, that could give us the edge. So all our players used to wear a different colour sock in training and in games. So they were trying to earn the right to wear the same colour sock, basically, and that run all the way through up until the youth team. But what you find is you get questioned whenever you want to do anything like this. I mean, I stole this idea off a Sunday League coach years ago who was doing it, and I just loved the concept, and we sort of had our own version of it, and people were. But because people are so obsessed with winning in football, you come up against, but what are you going to do if they start? If they're going to know what their weaker foot is, they're going to show them onto their weaker foot all the time. And I was like, great, fantastic. And then when we get to the stage where they show them onto their weaker foot and he cuts inside and he bends one in the top corner, fantastic. So, but because people are so obsessed with immediate results, anything you try and do that's a little bit different, you have to really sell it to them, which we managed to do in a great way. And that was another massive success of that, because, I had lads. I remember one of our first pros ended up playing left-sided centre-back. He was right-footed, but because of our programme, he'd become really proficient with both feet. We had the same with a full-back, could play left and right-back, and he ended up playing like 250 games and half of those was as a left-back. So again, it was always looking for those gains. So the ownership programme and the self-managing thing was always there. Players always did their own warm-ups, so it was just little things. There was constant little processes. It wasn't just the one thing. It was, if we went on tour, I used to get the parents to sign a waiver form, because I'd say, look, we're going to give them a certain amount of free time, because when you go on these tours, it was very much, don't let them do that, do this. And I said, are you happy to do this? So there was constant things that we did that probably went against the norm or the grain, if that makes sense. And then I just decided to ramp it up a little bit more one year, which was the videos I sent you, was when I actually sent the under-18s and they went without any coaches. They just went with a physio. But again, people, when they saw that, they thought, he's just sending them to... But it wasn't. It was part of an ongoing process. I just decided that particular group we had some talent in there, but I felt that they were getting a little bit, how can I put it? Some of the things that I see at Cat 1 academies that hold players back, I felt there was a bit of an issue there. So I just wanted them to take even extra responsibility and realise there's certain things that you don't need the coach for, because I think players become too reliable on coaches. So that thing where they travelled. Well, do you want to? Shall I tell you the story? Are you happy to?
Yeah, 100%. Let's go.
Yeah. So basically, at the start of the season, I just said to them, "How do you fancy taking a game on your own? No coaches at all. You'll just travel with a physio." And they were like, great. It wasn't a shock to them, because we'd always done various things with them around ownership. So we set a date, and it was Orient away, and I think it was something like a 10th game in. So within training, we were doing bits around it, leading up to it, but we got off to not a good start results wise. So we were playing some great football. Goalkeeper was having a bit of a tough time at the time, and I think when it got to that game, I think we'd drawn 3 and lost 6. So we hadn't won a game. So I said to the lads, because I'm a big believer that if you have high challenge, you've got to have high support. You know what I mean? You can't just... So I said to them, look, lads, if you don't want to do it, it's not a problem. We don't have to... And they went, no, we want to do it. We still want to do it. So they wanted to go ahead with it, bearing in mind they hadn't won a game. So they went away to Orient and they did everything, logistics, coach travel, all these things. And what people don't realise, there's so many fantastic outcomes. So even on the way to the game, the coach got stuck down a road. It couldn't fit down a certain road. So they thought they were going to be late. Now, normally, obviously, if they've got us on the coach, we would take control of that. But they didn't. They rung over to some of the lads who'd made their own way to Orient's ground because they lived a bit closer. They said, look, can you get everything set up? We're going to be 20 minutes late. We've had to go a different way. So already they're thinking on their feet, So anyway, they went to that game. They found themselves 2-0 down, played really well, apparently. But they were 2-0 down. They talked about changing formation at half-time. It's all on video. You guys who watch this can find it. Didn't change formation, decided that there wasn't a lot wrong. There was just a few things they needed to change. Went out second half, they were 1-0 down, went 2-0 down. They then changed formation themselves during the second half. Anyway, they come back to draw the game 2-2. Could have won it, should have won it. They come back, and the feeling of empowerment amongst the group was like just unbelievable. Do you know what I mean? And it wasn't about saying you don't need a coach. Of course, they need coach, but what I think is football's become so reliant on coaches, and there's so much that they're capable of and so much that they can do themselves. And it was more just a platform to work off. So I could say, look, you don't need us for this. You don't need us for that. You're more than capable, but we can start talking about extra detail. So anyway, after that game, hadn't won the next 10, we went to like 8 wins and 2 draws because they'd had such a result-wise not a great start. I left it to them to choose the next game. I said, do you want to do another one? They said, yeah, we'd love to. I said, well, you choose the next game. So they chose, we went to 8 wins, 2 draws. They had Luton away. Now Luton were top academy, always one of the best academies. They had Luton away. We had to beat Luton to qualify to be in the top group for the final stages, right? They chose that as the game. So they've now come to me and gone, Robbo, we want to do Luton away. Now they've totally, and I'm uncomfortable now because I'm like, well, I want to be there because this is, I know. So I'm kind of going, really? You sure you want to do that one? They're going, no, what a test this would be. What ultimate test. And I'm going, okay. So, I mean, when I look back now, it's wonderful. It's fantastic. But at the time, I'm like, oh, well, I want to be there because I want to have a certain amount of control. But they chose that game. And again, it's on video. We worked towards it. And they went there and they won 2-0. And unbelievable. And obviously, I had to okay this with the opposition and explain why we were doing it. And again, I had comments like, oh, you're doing yourself out of a job and all these kind of things. And it's like, well, for me as a coach, if you said to me, what does your perfect utopia look like? It is me standing on the line while players perform and they're creative and they're defending and because football's constant decision making and our job as coaches is to educate players to be able to make decisions. And do you know what I'm saying? Because once that whistle blows, you've got very little control, Gary. You know what I mean? I know we see all this gesticulating on the sidelines, but you haven't got a lot of control, and you shouldn't want loads of control, in my opinion. You want the players to be able to take control. So so that was kind of, and I had loads of reasons to not do it. I tried to get talked out of it by certain people. Even our FA educator at the time was like, I love it, but I think you should go and stand behind a tree. And I'm like, no. Look, once they know my presence is there, my presence is there. I don't want there to be that. And to be fair, it went well and we got asked to do talks on it and stuff. And but the biggest thing I'd say is the biggest compliment we can always get is anyone who's come into the environment, they always said Wimbledon boys are different. Outside people come in. I've had coaches come in. When we send players on loan, they always said the same thing. Wimbledon boys were different in the way they held themselves, conducted themselves. And I honestly believe the programme was the reason behind that.
Oh, it's like a spoiler.
You couldn't believe over here that in our US culture that someone would do that. But I think I love it because I think innovation is really, really hard in football. And that piece that you talked about losing a few games at the start, like that's usually where all the innovative processes go to die, don't they? They go to die 3 games in and they go revert back to norm. What type of, I guess, alongside the leadership piece, how do you get that in your staff to be like, listen, guys, we're sticking with it? What are some tricks there?
you just have to be strong. I'm trying to think if he'll mind me sharing. He won't mind me sharing. He's a good lad. He won't mind me sharing. You just have to be strong in your leadership. You know, if you're going to commit to a program and a way of doing things, you have to be strong. So, you know, again, going back to Wimbledon, because I'm proud of the work we did there, you know, we decided that we go toe-to-toe with everyone, no matter who we play. You know, so although we were obviously in a Category 3 program, we'd always arrange friendlies against Chelsea, Arsenal, you know, Category 1 clubs. And we would go absolutely toe-to-toe. And that, because fundamentally what I would want to see is, have we got players when we go toe-to-toe who still stand out, who still look as good? You know, so if we're leaving a defender 1v1, can he deal with a Cat 1 player? You know what I mean? So, and if it meant we lost, we lost. I mean, we used to have some great results, and that didn't mean that during the game we wouldn't be sitting in a mid block at a point again. Of course, that's just football, you know, and you'd educate the players to understand that. But we wouldn't go into a game against a Cat 1 side going, right, we're going to sit in a mid to deep block and play counter attack football. There's no point, because I'm not. You're not learning anything about your players apart from the fact that they can take on some tactical information. You want to look at, have you got individuals that you think can go and play at a higher level? So just to give you an example, we used to do stadium games at the end of the season. So at the end of the season, we'd invite a Category 1 club to come and play us at the stadium. So it was a big event. You know, we used to get a lot of parents, a lot of fans come down to watch all the games. So it'd be under 9s right the way through to the under 18s in the evening. So you used to get, you know, be anywhere between 800, 2,000 people come down to watch the games. And he won't mind me sharing this story, because he's doing really well for himself now. He's first team coach in the Championship, assistant coach. So he was really obsessed with winning, and in a good way. But we played Crystal Palace, and it was under 14s, and we beat them like 5-1. And but we sat in a mid to deep block, hit them on the break. We had a forward who was lightning quick. I think he scored 4 goals. So, you know, after the game, he's very pleased with himself, and I've pulled him to one side and absolutely like tore him to shreds and said, like, what was that all about? He's going, what do you mean? Like, we just beat Palace 5-1. I went, what I know nothing about any of those individuals. I've learned nothing about any of those individuals apart from the centre forward. I said, these games are to showcase and see where we are as individuals, you know, and see, is our programme, are we developing players? Are we competing with the Crystal Palaces and the Arsenals? Do you know what I mean? I said, all I know is now, that, which I knew already, that we've got a lightning quick centre forward. That's all I know. I know nothing else, apart from the fact that you're a really good coach and you've set them up to win a game, which I know that anyway. So, and it was just things like that, really. Just making sure that we didn't go away from our programme, that we did what we did. And when we lost, which you will sometimes, that you just come back, and the players understood it was part of the process, and we just kept getting better at what we did, you know, because I think the game, Gary, is, you know, the actual game, whether it be on a Saturday or whatever, is just a vehicle to see whether your development's working. Does that make sense? It's not an opportunity for a coach to showcase what a great coach he is, you know. And the way we always looked at it, the better you make the players individually, the performances will improve anyway, you know, and the more chance of winning anyway. So it wasn't that we didn't care about winning. We had an incredible FA Youth Cup record while I was there, but it was not at the detriment of developing the individual. Does that make sense? And that doesn't mean players don't need to understand what a mid block looks like, a deep block. Of course they do, but that can't be the program. You know, the program has to be about the individual.
Yeah, I want to stay there, because I think that's an unbelievable point. Is I think a lot of directors, technical directors, youth directors today are looking at, okay, if we're going to develop tomorrow's player, it's a highly tactical game, so it's got to be, the game model's going to be at the centre of everything. But all the things you're talking about is like, it's more values driven and more culturally aligned to, again, independence, decisions. Do you think we get swayed the wrong way there from a planning perspective, maybe?
I think we're in danger. I do think we're in real danger of that. I mean, for me, when I hear all this and we talk about tactics are, it's like fashion, Gary. It goes in trends. Do you know what I mean? I don't mean this rude. We've got inverted fullbacks now. I don't want to sound arrogant. We had fullbacks inverting 14 years ago, but not because we were inverting fullbacks, because we were educating players to find space. Do you know what I mean? And create space and find space. So naturally, part of that was that a fullback would come inside because maybe your 6 or your 8 had gone advanced, so he come into that position anyway. So, but I think to build a curriculum around things like that, where you're building curriculums around having inverted fullbacks, and I know people probably listening to this now might go, yeah, but what about Barcelona? What about Ajax? But even Barcelona don't play the same style of football now that they were playing under Pep, So I think it's dangerous personally, because what if you've got an unbelievable fullback who's brilliant at getting up and down the line, fantastic 1v1 defender, great deliverer of the ball, but possibly hasn't got that 360 degree, awareness of going into a midfield position. Doesn't mean he's not going to have a great career or couldn't have a great career. So I think it can be a little bit dangerous personally. And I think for me, it's more about creating problem solvers who recognise space, can create space. And, the biggest compliment we ever got paid, we played Hull in the FA Youth Cup at home. And we won 3-0. It could have been 10, 11. And our opponents in the next game, I got to know the head of football after. And he said, we watched the game 5 times and we still couldn't work out what your formation was. Like he said, we just could, because of the movement and do you know what I mean? And that, everyone's got their own opinion, but that's what you look for me. I mean, we played a 3-4-3 shape, but within that, it was looking very different. Sometimes it looked like a boxing midfield. You know what I mean? It varied because the players fed off each other and they knew how to find space and create space. And what you do on your top line affects everything else that you do on the rest of the pitch anyway. So that's just my personal view.
Yeah, when I was in analysis role, the amount of time in analysis, the greatest problem to solve during the week was when you had a team who had multiple shapes, and you'd be sitting in the office still on a Thursday, not arguing, discussing with coaches, saying, yeah, no, I think that's a 4, that's a 3, and you're just thinking, yeah, I wonder, do they know how this is 10 hours we've wasted on this week, And that's where, if you put that in around multiple levels, you'd actually ask more questions about opponents rather than trying to perfect a shape that is ultimately going to be easier to prepare against.
Yeah. And again, it's as well, it's just that individual as well. I remember playing an academy once with an obsession of playing out from the back. And when I look at football, there's 3 ways to play football. You play through teams, around teams, or over teams. It's never going to change, But if you and I know it's changed slightly now. Teams like to play that they're happily to play into pressure because then they will play out and they find space elsewhere. But I just think if you've got an obsession with one way, and I remember playing this team and I think we won 7-0 and we just kept pressing and nicking the ball and scoring. And they were saying, yeah, but we're teaching them to do the right thing. And I know why they're saying it, but then their best player who got the ball was their number 10, but he got the ball about 8 times and he was a fantastic player. And I'm going, yeah, but what about his development? He's touched the ball 8 times, and your centre forward barely touched the ball at all. So,
but that's, Mark, just on that, sorry to interrupt, that's where, like, the position I think that's dropping the most is the defensive midfielder, the 6, the holder, because you've got 3 players at youth level now alongside that player to solve every problem. Transition can solve they can get cover defensively, they can get cover, they can solve all their in possession stuff. Nobody's really asking about what if we do overload an area with a player who actually needs the development of getting a bit more space. Passing range even goes out the window today for sixes. You know, there's so many other things I don't think we talk about.
There's so many things, and basically players will end up being a product of your environment. You know, even if I go back to myself as a young player, you know, my early days as a player was growing up on my council estate. My brother was 7 years older than me, and he was a fantastic brother, and he used to take me out with his mates. So my early days of playing football was me as an 8-year-old playing with lads who were 13, 14 and 15. And that dictated what I was like. So at a young age, I was unbelievable tackler, no fear. Do you know what I mean? Never lost the 50 because I was a product of that environment. When I got picked up at Fulham, I had a technical coach whose technical detail was unbelievable. And he was obsessed with technique, and I became technically very good, but I lost some of the edge that I had when I was younger, if that makes sense. So I think it's, you know, when we talk about football, we talk about the tactical, the technical, the physical, the social, but they're not divided. They've all got to be there all the time. Does that make sense? So, you know, when you're planning sessions, my biggest thing when you're planning a session is I don't want the how can I put it? I don't want the level of challenge to be low on any of those aspects, if that makes sense. So even if we're doing a technical drill, I still want there to be some social element in there. And I still want there to be some tactical element in there that the players are thinking about. I don't want it to just be a technical session where you go, well, the technical level and challenge was really high, but everything else was low. You know, there's got to be other elements you can add, and you need to be creative to try and get those other elements out. You know, even if it's why are you making that pass? When would you be making that pass in the game? Do you know what I mean? And putting different conditions in. And I think, and that's the key. It's like you said about the range of passing. You know, we're losing those midfielders, I think, who can just open up and hit those Gerrard passes. You know, I think we're losing those, and that's again because a lot of the coach training environments now are small-sided. We've got players who can look after the ball unbelievably in tight areas, but we're possibly losing that. You know, so I think you've got to be really careful about your training environments and learning environments.
All right, let's go to your leadership and some of the influences you mentioned there, the influence of you as a player, as an environment. But I'm really fascinated about these sources of, again, creativity, innovation. You've looked outside football. There seems to be a bit of a rugby influence as well. How is that? How has that come across? Yeah,
I think you've always got to stay curious, and I think because I spent quite a lot of time outside of football when I stopped playing, and I went into business and stuff, so that opened my eyes to a lot of leadership and things like that. So I think you've got to remain curious, and you've got to look into other sports. And I've done various things. I looked into hockey, and I was thinking, how does hockey not get loads of back problems? You know, when you're running, it's very similar to football, and they're running this really awkward position. So what did their physical program look like to avoid? Do you know what I mean? So, and rugby was just sort of happened by coincidence. Obviously, I think all coaches look at rugby in the terms of the way players behave, the respect side of it. It's so, and then, and I was lucky to have certain visits that I made. Apologies, Gal. And it was more just going into different cultures and experience. So sorry, I went with Eddie Jones. You know, Eddie Jones coming to Wimbledon, which was great. And then I got invited to go and watch England train, and just the things like the level of detail that people would go into. That was the thing that, and again, how much ownership there was in rugby, how much ownership they would take. You know, I remember going to watch England train, and the players just literally were back. There wasn't a second wasted. It was boom, 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 all not what they were doing. You didn't have to tell them to do stuff. They just went and done it. And the level of detail, I remember, I think England were playing someone like Samoa on the Saturday, and the training session was, I think it was on the Wednesday, and they were expecting rain on the Saturday. So they had the coaches dipping the balls in buckets of water. You know what I mean? Just things like that. I just love stuff like that. Then you're just thinking, wow, okay. You know, and it makes you go away and think, right, okay, this is a top level, you know, and start thinking about things like that, really. Just little nuggets, and sort of done a little work. I've done also a lot of work with individual sportsmen, so tennis coaches, because the way when I looked at it at Wimbledon, again, going back to, well, how are we going to make this academy successful when we've got very limited resources, you know? And I thought, well, fundamentally, what we are trying to do, we're trying to take an individual and we're trying to turn him into a professional footballer in amongst the team environment, if that makes sense. And again, when you look at individual sports and you look at the ownership they take of their programs and what they do for themselves, I think we get very misguided in football what we think professionalism is. And I think we think professionalism is giving someone everything. And I see it very different to that, you know, because if you know, because all the things that coaches get frustrated about, oh, he's not resilient enough, he's not this enough, he's not that enough. It's like, well, what do you expect? We give them absolutely everything. So why do you expect them to be like that? You know, so, yeah.
The piece there, we talked a little bit before on air, off air about the visits as well, and something that, last few questions for you, something that the coaches will, I don't think it's great in our culture in America. I actually don't think coaches get out and about enough around, but I think there's a skill to going on a visit and getting something from it. And I mean, when you're in a visit, and this might be a really general question or even a bad question, but like what kind of, when you're driving up, how do you prepare for it? How do you reflect on it? Can you just give us a little overview into how you approach the visits?
I don't prepare in any particular way other than I just want to be massively curious to what they do and why they do it. And I think there's a danger if you become, you know, I had a young coach at Wimbledon once who went on everything. So I think you got to keep your own identity and your own beliefs. I think that's important. So otherwise you can just become like a course junkie, and you go on every course and you come back, and I don't think you don't want to be that. You've got to have your own identity. You know what you want to do, but I think you just need to go and be really curious and ask loads of questions and find out why they do it, what's the purpose for what they do it. And I think within that, I got an awful lot of validation in terms of what we were doing. But then you would always find at least one beautiful nugget that you could take back with you. You know, that was the key thing, is just looking for that nugget that could make your program better. So it's not about coming back and changing your program, because you're doing it for a reason and you believe in it. But it's finding that nugget that can take you again that next step, hopefully.
The differentiation piece, and I actually spoke to a coach this morning. I think this is becoming, again, something that's coming on coaches' radars a lot around the world. Is, listen, I'm up against with so much financial investment in youth development. There's obviously going to be the haves and the have-nots, and as we all know, most of us aren't fortunate enough to be with the haves. So the have-nots are all sitting going, listen, need to be different, I need to do this. So I think this is a common thing. What advice would you have for a coach who is sitting down with a blank piece of paper and saying, I might be listening to this and has 50 more ideas and wants to implement everything, or how would you say go through a process of 6 to 12 months of putting together some different things?
Well, I think if you're in development, first thing I'd say is, for me, it's player first, player last. I think if you're going into development and you want to be a success, if you're feeding yourself just loads of tactical stuff and that's all you're ever watching is tactical stuff, formation, shapes, my personal opinion, it's got to be about the player first, player last if you're going into player development. And as I said, then the game is the vehicle then to see their progression, their development. I would say know what you are, because again, there's so much information out there now. I think it's really important you know what you are as a coach and what your strengths are and what you're going to bring. And also, if you've got certain beliefs, don't be derailed from those beliefs, because you might go into a room with someone who you can perceive as more knowledgeable than you. You know, if you really believe in something, you believe in it for a reason. And I don't let that detract from you. You know, I've been in rooms with people who have played, you know, top level football, and I see things differently. And you do question yourself. It's tough, but I think football's really habitual, Gary, and really habitual behaviours. And I think there's a lot goes on and people don't really know why they do it, apart from the fact that it's been done for a very long time and we just continue doing it. So, you know, if you really believe in something, believe in it, because, you know, because someone else might tell you, no, that's not the way. You know, listen, be open to it, but don't let that detract you, you know, because maybe you didn't have the career that the person you're listening to. If you believe in that and you've got reasons why, and you know, then stick with it. And then regarding ideas, what I would say is, if you've got an idea and it's not being met with mass approval, there's a good chance it might be a really good idea. You know, I don't think any idea that I come up with or my staff come up with, I don't think we ever sat at any idea that made us much better. I don't think the room ever went, wow, that's a fantastic idea. We all went, oof, okay, let me think about that. Are you sure? Blah, blah, blah. Because by nature, it was different. You know, I don't want to get too deep, but you look at politics, right? That's why politics don't change in this country, because all they do is paper over cracks, because someone's too scared to actually turn around and go, this is what we need to do. We might need to go through 3 or 4 years of a little bit of this, but this is going to make us so much better off. Because no one wants to do that, because they think, oh, if people are going to go through 4 years of hard times, they won't vote for them. Does that make sense? So all they do is they just have a pop at the other party and then try and paper over the cracks. So I don't think any idea that's really worth doing is probably ever met with mass approval. I think it'd be met with a lot of, oh, I'm not sure, don't know why we'd want to do that. So I'll give you an example. We got time?
Absolutely. By the way, what a brilliant topic this is. Keep going.
So I think Michael Hamilton, did you?
Yeah.
You read Mike. So Mike, brilliant. Like,
outstanding. Yeah.
Outstanding. So I brought Mike in years ago. He left a good job to come and join me when we were grassroots, bless him. So, but fantastic person. And he come up with an idea. We were sitting in the office and he goes, this was when I was under 18s coach. So I was doing the under 18s. He went, and everything was about our culture and being together. You know, we're a fan-owned club. He goes, Robert, how do you fan? He goes, I think that it'd be really good if the under 9s, under 10s, whatever, they come in on a match day on a Saturday, because they played on a Sunday. So they come in on a Saturday. I said, right, okay. And you sit with them before the game, okay? And you talk about who you're playing, the game plan, blah, blah, blah. This is all before we play on 18. So I'm going, right, okay. And he said, then they go into the dressing room and the players give them their IAPs, their individual action plans for the game. And they sit with the players for 10 minutes and they note down their individual action plans. And they watch the game with a purpose and they make notes on the players and then they feed it back after the game. So it was so we had Rob Tuvey there, who was part of sort of 9s through to, he's going, great idea, think it'd be really good. Joe was the same, because Jeremy was there, was kind of looking at me, waiting, I think, to see what I'm thinking, and James was sitting there, who's my assistant, I know who's such a winner. He's having a great career. He's doing great. I know he's thinking, you're having a laugh. You're mad. You want a group of 9-year-olds sitting in the dressing room before blah, blah, blah. So I'm sitting there, I'm going, okay, Mike, let me think. Well, what are tell me the outcomes? And he listed like 5 outcomes that he go, look at this, as well as obviously these young players getting that experience of being in the under-18s dressing room. Like he said, this is gold dust. So he gave me the outcomes. So I went away, thought about it. And I come back and I said, all right, let's do it. And I must admit, I wasn't sure. But Gary, wow, it was beautiful. It was one of the best things like we ever, so because when I actually felt, I thought, what do I actually do before a game? You've done all your prep, right? You there's nothing you're really doing apart from your usual football stuff. So instead of doing that, I'm now sitting with 9, 10, 11-year-olds. It was so good, honestly, sitting there. They're talking to me. I've built a connection with them because I love to go down. I used to go down to training during the week as well and like to watch train. So I'm building a bigger connection with these young lads who are coming through our academy. They're building a bigger connection with me. You then take them into the dressing room. The lads are becoming nurturers, like the 18s lads, start nurturing these young lads. And the knowledge of these young boys was brilliant. The only thing that was quite funny with it was the feedback after the game. So there was only one game when I didn't allow it. We played a particular rival and it got a little bit, we ended up drawing the game and the lads, and I think we had the under 9s and I just said, Mike, I don't think they should go in the dressing room now. But generally, win, lose or draw, the lads went in after the game and they sat with these boys and they gave them feedback. But honestly, it was brilliant. It was, and that's what I'm saying. And I've said this to other coaches and they go, what? So before a game, you're talking but it was, honestly, it was brilliant. And again, I think we have to behave in a certain way because it's a big game and they got to be in the zone. It's like, well, how long can you be in the zone for before a game? Do you know what I mean? It's and I actually think it helped relax the boys. If I'm honest, I think it relaxed them. So that's an example of ideas. So my biggest thing is if you have an idea, don't be put off it because people might not go, oh yeah, that's great. I think if everyone sits in a room and goes, oh, what a great idea, it's probably because, not being funny, it's probably been done and it's not going to make a lot of change. That would be my biggest thing.
Brilliant. That is top class. Top class. All right, last one, and I'm sure you've got this quite a bit, but let's say it's a youth coach at the minute who's a young coach as well and has aspirations to get to the first team level, professional level, work with senior players. How would you guide that coach on their maybe short to medium term career plans?
Again, because I guess we're talking about coaches who are into development here. Again, I would just say, the biggest thing I'd say, Gary, is know what you are, know what type of coach you are, what you want to do, but and just constantly be curious. Really, it'd be the same message: be curious, but don't go away from what you believe in. But be curious and keep adding little bits of nuggets. I'm a very different coach now to when I started, but my values haven't changed, my beliefs haven't massively changed, but I coach in a different way to what I did, because I've picked up bits. So there's so stay curious. No one knows everything. You know what I mean? No, and we'd all be doing the same thing if there was one way. So, but don't lose your identity. Don't you? I mean, if you don't mind, the biggest thing I say, I think on coaching though is, and there's a big topic on, is I look at coaching and I go, there's two types of coaches. There's a map reading coach and there's a satellite navigation system coach, right? And what I mean by that is, if you and I are going on a journey and I've got a satellite navigation system to take me drive on that, and you're reading a map, who's going to get to the destination quicker, me or you? Me, right?
Quickly. Yeah.
I've got a sat nav, tells me where to go, turn left, turn right, do that, do this. I'll get there first, right? You with your map, you'll pull over, you're taking points of interest, you'll live the journey. Does that make sense? You'll live that journey. You'll get a feel for that journey. Now, if you and I then go and have to do that journey, exactly the same journey again, you get your map taken away. I can't turn on my Saturn navigation system. You will do that journey so much better, efficiently and quicker than me. I won't have a clue how to go because I haven't felt it. I haven't sensed it. I haven't had to solve anything along the way. I haven't taken any points of interest. And that's what I think coaching is. Coaching is a messier process. It's not show and tell. Players need to feel it. They need to be asking questions. It needs to be interactive. I'm not saying there aren't times to go, no, that's what you need to do. Of course there is. But that's, for me, what the journey of a player should be taking, if that makes sense. And then you're there to support them through that journey. But it needs to be messy. It needs to be full of questions, full of problem solving. You know, that's the way I see it, really.
Fantastic. Oh, what a way to finish it. Mark, outstanding. Thank you so much. This was amazing. I really, really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Gary. Been a pleasure.